She was let go for something as human as bringing her son to work. No apology, no second chance, just a cold goodbye. But as she packed up in tears, a new boss stepped in, eyes locked on the child, and whispered, "I know him, because that boy was me." And in that moment, everything changed. "Why is your son here?" "Brenda, this is a workplace, not a daycare." Letitia's voice echoed through the meeting room, drawing everyone's eyes to the young woman sitting at the end of the table. She stood straight in her neat navy blue suit, arms crossed, with a determined look in her eyes. Brenda held Mateo tight. The little boy was flushed with fever, breathing heavily as he buried his face in her chest. Her blonde hair stuck to her cheeks, damp with stress. "I don't have anyone else," she said softly. "He's sick. I can't take another day off." Letitia shook her head. "The compensation policy is very clear. No kids allowed on the premises. This is unacceptable." Silence fell over the room. Brenda looked around, hoping someone would speak up. Her colleagues avoided her gaze. She swallowed hard. "I just need to finish my shift. That's all." Letitia's tone turned sharp. "You're terminated, effective immediately." Brenda froze, her breath quickening, heart racing. No one moved. No one said a word, only the rustle of papers and the hum of the overhead lights. Letitia turned away, her task done. Brenda hugged Mateo tighter, his hot little body pressed against hers. She slowly turned and walked out, her legs shaky. The hallway was empty. She pushed through the glass doors into a gray, drizzly afternoon. Rain fell lightly on the sidewalk. Brenda took off her jacket and wrapped it tightly around Mateo, her blouse quickly soaked through, clinging to her back. Mateo groaned. "Mom, I'm so cold." "I know." "Sweetie," she whispered and kissed his forehead. They walked down the stairs, passing people rushing by with umbrellas. No one stopped. No one looked. The world kept moving. She felt invisible. Each step felt heavier than the last. She'd lost her job. Her son was sick. The bills were piling up. Her phone was dead. She had no car, no one to call. But she kept walking. At the street corner, she stopped. Mateo's breathing was shallow and wheezy. Brenda hugged him closer, pressing her cheek to his forehead. "We'll be okay," she murmured. "I won't give up." Now the rain was coming down harder. Brenda sheltered him as best she could, tucking his head under her chin. He coughed again, his small hand clutching her necklace. She passed a brightly lit coffee shop, and safe. Brenda hesitated, then turned. Warmth radiated from the windows. People inside were laughing, dry and safe. Brenda hesitated, then turned away before anyone could see her, forming, "I won't give up. I won't." She kept moving. In her mind, a mantra formed, "I won't give up," splashing around her shoes, then ducked, "I won't give up." She crossed the street, water splashing around her shoes, then ducked under the awning of a store for a moment's shelter. Mateo stirred slightly, mumbling in his sleep. Brenda looked down at him and brushed the wet strands of hair from his forehead. "You'll be okay, buddy," she whispered. "I promise." The rain still hadn't stopped. The wind kept blowing, but she stood there holding her son, not out of desperation, but quiet determination. She had nothing left but him. And for her, that was everything. Brenda clutched a worn stack of job applications, the creases deepening with each rejection. She'd walked from one end of town to the other, knocking on doors, talking to managers, leaving resumes at diners, convenience stores, gas stations, even cleaning services. Every conversation always ends the same way. Those polite smiles fade away as they ask about her most recent job. As soon as the word "stop" appeared, the tone immediately changed. "I'm sorry, ma'am. We're looking for someone with a more stable background. HR marks that kind of dismissal. We can't do anything about it. We'll call if something comes up, but it never does." By the fourth week, Brenda had pawned her engagement ring, the one that had sat in a drawer since Mateo's dad disappeared. That money went toward food and a cheap inhaler, the best she could afford without insurance. Mateo's breathing became shallow, but it wasn't enough. One night, with the wind howling outside their shelter, a dimly lit gas station restroom, Mateo's breathing became shallow and rapid. His little chest heaved with each breath. Brenda leaned over him, gripping the inhaler and whispering, Just breathe. Sweetie, please just breathe. She counted to 10 with him, trying to keep her voice steady, tears welling up in her eyes. He nodded, trusting her completely. He had no home, no savings, and a son who needed more than just love could provide. The gas station attendant, an older woman named Carol with tired eyes, took pity and let them stay in the staff restroom overnight. It wasn't much, just a couch, a blanket Carol pulled from her car, and a flickering fluorescent light, but it was dry and warm enough to keep Mateo safe, and trash cans. She worked at night. Brenda cleaned, wiping down the bathroom, replacing paper towels, scrubbing greasy doorknobs and trash cans. She worked in silence, her hands rough, knees aching. The smell of ammonia and bleach filled her lungs but kept her alert. Every dollar she earned was counted 3 times before she spent it. One evening, she returned to the restroom after her shift. Mateo was curled up under the thin blanket, finally breathing steadily. His face was peaceful in sleep, cheeks slightly flushed from the fever. Brenda sat beside him, brushing his hair back. She leaned down and gently kissed his forehead, whispering, "You did great today. Honey, I'm so proud of you." He stirred slightly, whispering, "I love you, Mom." Her throat tightened. She glanced at the clock on the wall. It was nearly 3 a.m. Her shift would start again in less than an hour. She could barely feel her legs, and her arms trembled from exhaustion. Brenda tucked the blanket tighter around him and placed the inhaler near his chest. Then, she whispered, "Good night, my little lion. I'll be right back." She stood quietly and closed the door behind her. The hallway was empty. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly as she picked up the mop and bucket. Her body ached, her eyes stung, but her resolve stayed strong. She'd clean every floor in the city if it meant Mateo could breathe easier, if it meant he'd smile again without that wheeze in his chest. She whispered it to herself like a quiet prayer. "I'll come back. I'll always come back." Brenda had grown used to the gentle knock on her door each morning, 3 soft taps, a pause, then a soft voice in Spanish. "Mija, I brought you this." It was Mrs. Maria, her neighbor down the hall. The elderly woman had weathered her own storms in life, raising 4 kids alone, surviving layoffs, and holding on to her dignity with sheer willpower. Brenda had once helped her carry groceries upstairs. From then on, Maria watched over her like a guardian angel, in her worn slippers and a headscarf that always smelled of lavender. That morning, Maria handed Brenda a folded flyer Solux Rivera was printed boldly at the top. "They're hiring for afternoon cleaning positions. No qualifications required." Brenda stared at it as if it might vanish. "It's a cleaning company," Maria explained. "They mostly handle office buildings. It's not glamorous, but it's steady." She glanced at Mateo, who was sitting nearby drawing superheroes on cardboard scraps, "and they get run by folks like us." "Maybe they'll understand." Brenda gripped the flyer. "Thank you. I'll go right now." The next day, she and Mateo took 2 buses across town. Mateo clung to her hand, his little legs already tired before they arrived. The Solux Rivera building was modest, made of gray brick with a simple lobby that smelled faintly of lemon and floor polish. Brenda checked in at the reception desk and got a short application form. She sat on a plastic chair, balancing the form on her knee, trying not to let her hands shake as she filled in her name, previous jobs, and the question she dreaded, "Have you ever been fired from a job?" Her pen paused on the yes box for a moment. She checked yes. Mateo coughed beside her, a deep, raspy sound that made the receptionist jump. Brenda placed her hand on his back and whispered, "It's okay, sweetie." He leaned into her shoulder, breathing heavily. His inhaler was almost empty. Just then, a man walked into the lobby, deep in thought, holding a keyring and a phone. He wore dark jeans and a button-up white shirt with sleeves rolled up, looking like he hadn't slept much. His hair was graying at the temples, and his sharp, dark eyes caught Mateo's attention. He slowed down. Brenda noticed him glancing their way. For a moment, their eyes met. His gaze shifted to Mateo, then back to her. There was something in his expression, not pity, not judgment, but a flicker of memory, recognition. Then, he nodded politely and kept walking. Brenda finished the form with trembling fingers and handed it back. She didn't expect to hear from them. But the next afternoon, her phone rang. Ms. Lopez, this is Elena from Solik Rivera. We'd like to offer you a part-time cleaning position on the afternoon shift. You can start tomorrow. Brenda's mouth dropped open. Wait, really? Yes. And we understand you might need to bring your son. There's a break room as long as he's safe and stays out of the work areas. Brenda could hardly speak. Thank you. Thank you so much. She hung up and pulled Mateo into a hug. We've got this, sweetie. Mom's going back to work. The next day, Brenda walked into the company's modest headquarters with her son by her side. The staff were kind, many of them immigrants like her, speaking English and Spanish. Elena, the supervisor, showed her where the supplies were kept and pointed out the staff break room, a small space with a couch, a mini fridge, and an old TV that still played DVDs. Mateo sat quietly on the couch, sketchbook in hand, while Brenda started her work. She mopped floors, emptied trash, and wiped down windows. It was tough manual labor, but she was grateful for every second. At one point during her shift, Brenda glanced through the glass window into the hallway and saw the man from the lobby, Bruce Rivera. He paused for a moment when he saw her working, then nodded slightly, more in acknowledgement than superiority. She nodded back, not sure who he really was. But in that moment, she felt something shift. A door had opened, and this time, she was walking through it. Every afternoon, Brenda put on her gloves and got to work. She scrubbed sinks in the restrooms until they shone, wiped down scuffed tiles and cleaned smudges off the glass until her reflection was clear. She didn't complain. She didn't stop, even with her back aching and her hands raw from cleaners. Brenda kept going because just down the hall, in a small break room with an old couch and faded walls, her son was safe. Mateo was curled up with his sketchbook, his colored pencils worn down to stubs, drawing stick figure heroes and lopsided hearts. Brenda checked on him every hour. She'd rush in, lean down, and wipe the sweat from his forehead with the edge of her sleeve, even if it still smelled of ammonia and bleach. Are you okay? Sweetie, she whispered each time. Mateo always nodded, too tired to speak, but his eyes always sought comfort from her, and she quietly gave it with a soft kiss on his forehead and a stroke of his curly hair. It was their rhythm, learned together. Brenda cleaned, Mateo rested, and time passed like fragile promises. One Thursday afternoon, something changed. Brenda stepped into the break room to check on her son as usual and stopped at the door. Mateo was sitting up, eyes wide, hands planted firmly on a small table. Spread out in front of him was a neat array of treasures, a brand new box of colored pencils, 2 thick comic books, and a small stuffed lion with soft fur and a crooked smile. He looked up at her. Mom, where did this come from? Brenda stepped closer, her breath catching. I don't know. She picked up the pencil box, turning it over as if an explanation might be printed on the back. Nothing. She opened one of the still new comic books, the fresh paper smell hitting her. Her fingers trembled slightly as she set it down. Mateo's eyes lit up with a joy she hadn't seen in weeks. Can I keep them? He asked quietly. Brenda nodded, too stunned to speak. Of course, sweetie, of course. Later, on her break, she asked around, did anyone leave these things in the break room for my son? Everyone shook their heads. Everyone seemed surprised. Elena, her supervisor, shrugged, probably some office worker. I don't know, but it's sweet, isn't it? Brenda smiled and murmured a thank you, not directed at anyone in particular. But inside her, a quiet warmth blossomed. At the end of the hallway, behind the slightly dented office door, Bruce Rivera stood still. He had just walked past the break room a few minutes ago without being noticed and saw Mateo holding a pencil with trembling hands. He had seen the boy's eyes light up just like he had when the boy's mother brought him the sandwich that he had saved from the customer's leftovers. He remembered the feeling of being a kid in the corner of the room, left alone and unnoticed, until someone finally paid attention. He hadn't meant to stand there that long, but when he saw Brenda kneeling beside her son, her eyes sparkling with emotion, something in his chest tightened up. He gripped the doorframe tightly, his jaw clenched. There weren't many memories in his life more painful than watching his mom scrub hotel floors late at night without anyone to help. And nothing felt more sacred than remembering that time someone left him a toy on Christmas Eve, a small gesture that shaped his whole understanding of kindness. He hadn't planned on getting involved, but this was different. That night, Brenda sat next to Mateo as he drew with his new colored pencils. He was coloring a superhero with curly hair and a lion beside him. Brenda leaned back against the chair and smiled softly. "Someone's watching us," she whispered. Mateo looked up like a guardian angel. Brenda nodded. "Maybe." Down the hallway, Bruce headed back to his desk and stared at the closed door for a long while. Sometimes the smallest things make the biggest difference. And sometimes it all starts with a box of colored pencils. The supply closet was dimly lit, filled with the stale smell of cleaning chemicals and old cardboard. Brenda knelt on the linoleum floor, her knees pressed against the cold tiles, one hand clutching a damp rag. Mateo lay nearby on a folded towel, his face pale, his eyes glassy from fever. To make him laugh, Brenda twisted the rag into a puppet shape and wiggled it in front of him. "Look, Mateo, Mr. Sock is here to save the day," she said in a silly voice, letting out a high-pitched giggle. She made the homemade puppet dance on his blanket, using exaggerated voices and goofy moves. Mateo let out a weak chuckle, his breathing wheezy, but a smile still spread across his tired face. Through the crack in the closet door, Bruce stood frozen. He had come down to check on a delivery, but stopped when he heard the laughter. It was a small, wheezy sound, but real. What he saw left him stunned. Brenda, kneeling there with sweat on her forehead and stains on her uniform, looked exhausted, but she was still smiling. She was making her son laugh in that supply closet, pouring her heart into a dirty rag. Bruce quietly backed away and returned to his office. He slowly sat down at his desk, staring up at the ceiling and rubbing his eyes. But it wasn't exhaustion burning in him. It was memories. He saw his own mom from decades ago, behind a cheap motel, cleaning up at night. A 5-year-old boy, burning up with fever and scared. She had no toys, no medicine, just a couple of mismatched socks that she turned into dancing puppets. They made him laugh, just like Mateo. And like Mateo, he had no idea how tired she was. 3 days later, the sky poured down rain. Rain came in heavy sheets, flooding the gutters and spilling into the Rivera Building's parking lot. It was nearly 7 p.m., and most of the staff had gone home. Brenda stepped out the side door, holding Mateo tight to her chest, his head buried in her jacket. She didn't have an umbrella, just an old jacket wrapped around them both, shielding him from the wind and rain. As she stepped into the downpour, a shadow moved beside her. A large, dark umbrella opened up over them. Brenda turned around in surprise. Bruce stood next to her, quiet and calm. Rain poured down around them, but under the umbrella, it felt peaceful, almost sacred. He didn't say anything for a while, just walked beside her along the slippery pavement. Mateo peeked his head out from the jacket, his eyes wide. When they reached the edge of the parking lot, Bruce stopped. He handed her the umbrella. "No one who's trying to do the right thing deserves to walk in the rain," he said gently. Then he turned and headed back toward the building without waiting for thanks. Brenda stood there, one hand holding the umbrella, the other holding her son, stunned into silence. From that day on, something changed. She started noticing him more. He always arrived early. He asked the staff how their families were doing. He lingered outside the break room, like he was checking if Mateo was okay. He never asked for recognition. In fact, he seemed uncomfortable with it. Brenda began to understand him in a way she couldn't explain. A week later, Mateo walked into the main office with a folded piece of paper. Brenda had told him to wait in the break room, but he wandered in with quiet determination. Bruce was sitting at his desk reviewing bills when the boy appeared. Mateo said, "This is for you," and held out the paper. Bruce took it and carefully unfolded it. It was a drawing. A tall man holding an umbrella over a woman and a child in the rain. A smile was on the child's face. At the top, Mateo had written in block letters, "Thank you, Mr. Bruce. You're like a silent superhero." Bruce's throat tightened. He looked at the boy, who just shrugged and said, "Mom says people like you can save the world without making a sound." He reached out and gently ruffled Mateo's hair. "I'll keep it safe," Bruce said in his own voice, and he did. He taped it inside his office cabinet. That night, he placed a small inhaler labeled inside Brenda's locker. There was a note about how the most important breaths matter. He also called Elena, the supervisor, and arranged to cover Brenda and Mateo's lunches for the rest of the month, anonymously. Of course, he wasn't trying to be a hero. He was just trying to pay forward the kindness that a woman with nothing had given him, like Brenda was doing now. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon when Bruce walked into the break room, carrying a small paper bag. "I think Mateo might like these," he said, gently setting the bag on the table. Brenda looked up from wiping down the counter. "More cookies?" she asked with a playful smile. Bruce had mentioned he liked the ones with chocolate chips and caramel. "I think I'll get it right this time." Mateo peered into the bag and touched them. "Mom, they're still warm." Brenda watched Bruce sit next to her son and listen as he talked about his drawings, his favorite superheroes, and the comic book he was trying to write. Bruce smiled, nodded, and even laughed when Mateo said he wanted to be a cleaning superhero like his mom. When Mateo ran to the corner to draw, Brenda found herself watching Bruce more closely. "Wondering," she said gently. "Why are you—" "I've been wondering," she said gently. "Why do you care about us so much, The amusement in his eyes fading, Bruce looked at her, the amusement in his eyes fading a bit, his smile softening. He was silent for a moment before answering. "Because I was like Mateo," he said, "and your mother is like my mother was, strong, stubborn, always tired, but she never gave up." Brenda blinked, surprised by his honesty, the weight behind his words. He continued, his eyes distant. "She used to sneak me into the hotel closet while she cleaned the night shift. I remember falling asleep on towels, listening to her hum lullabies as she scrubbed the floors." Brenda didn't say anything. For the first time, she saw Bruce not just as the quiet man helping them, but as someone shaped by the same kind of pain, someone who had learned empathy through survival. In that moment, the air between them shifted, boundaries blurred. A few days later, the company held its annual celebration. Fold-up chairs were lined up in the warehouse. A small stage at the front was decorated with blue and white Rivera balloons. Staff gathered, laughing, eating snacks, and chatting in English and Spanish. Brenda stood in the back, wearing her cleanest uniform, with Mateo beside her in a slightly oversized button-up shirt that Maria had ironed for the occasion. When Bruce stepped onto the stage, the room went quiet. "Thank you all for being here," he began. "Rivera Solutions was built by people who understand struggle, who know what it means to work hard with little and dream anyway." He scanned the crowd. His eyes stopped on Brenda. "I want to share a story with you," he said. "When I was a kid, my mom was a janitor. She worked nights scrubbing floors in silence, hiding me in the supply closet because we couldn't afford daycare. She never complained, never asked for help, and no one ever helped her." The room was still, thick with emotion. "A few weeks ago, I saw a young mom doing the same thing," Bruce continued. "Exhausted, overworked, and loving her son with every breath she had left. I saw her, and it brought it all back." He paused, swallowing hard. "I'm proud to work with someone like Brenda Lopez. Her strength, her grace, her dedication. She's everything this company stands for." There was a stunned silence before the applause erupted, loud and lasting. "And so," Bruce added, his voice a bit louder, "I'm honored to officially promote Brenda to supervisor, effective immediately." Brenda's mouth fell open, and she held her breath. "And," he said, turning to Mateo, "Rivera Solutions will provide a full scholarship for Mateo Lopez through high school and college if he chooses, so no kid has to carry their parents' burdens alone." The crowd stood up, applauding, some wiping away tears. Brenda's legs nearly buckled beneath her. She felt Mateo's hand slip into hers. She didn't cry for the promotion or the scholarship or even the recognition. She cried because for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel alone. Bruce stepped down from the stage and walked straight to her. He didn't say anything, just looked at her, his eyes gentle, with a quiet question in his expression. She nodded, speechless, and he smiled. Because sometimes the loudest words are the ones left unsaid. And sometimes the strongest victories don't come from climbing up, but from holding others steady until they can stand on their own. Brenda adjusted the collar of her crisp white shirt, checking the name tag pinned right over her heart. It read, Brenda Lopez, Supervisor. The first time she saw it, she almost cried. Now she wore it with quiet pride. Her morning started earlier, her voice firmer when greeting the cleaning team, her steps more confident down the halls. She still worked hard, maybe even harder, but now there was a difference. She felt seen, she felt heard, and she held her head a little higher. Mateo's life changed too. His new school had a real library, with beanbags and shelves full of books about superheroes. At the door, asking about his drawings, the teachers knew his name by the second day. They greeted him at the door, asking about his drawings, encouraging his stories. He started laughing more, laughing louder, breathing easier. Some days, Brenda would find Bruce in the break room after meetings, sitting across from Mateo at the small table, a chessboard between them. Bruce wasn't very good at it, and he knew it, but Mateo always giggled when he caught him making a clumsy move. Other times, Bruce would bring a new comic book, pretending it was just lying around his office. Mateo would jump into his arms with pure joy. Brenda would watch from the hallway, arms crossed, smiling in spite of herself. She and Bruce never talked about what was happening between them, but the vibe was different now. When they passed in the hallway, his eyes lingered a bit longer. When he asked how her day was, the question always carried weight. And when she answered, he really listened. They moved in slow, unspoken steps. Two people, not rushing toward something new, but quietly healing from something old. One Thursday evening, the rain came fast and fierce. Thunder echoed off the building walls as lightning lit up the sky. Brenda stayed late, updating reports and helping a new team member get oriented. When she finished, the halls were dark and quiet. She headed for the exit, with Mateo waiting with Elena in the break room. But something caught her eye just outside Bruce's office. On the floor was a neatly folded raincoat, brand new, dark blue with a hood. Beside it was a small takeout container, steam still rising from the edges. A simple note sat on top, written in clear, strong handwriting. Thank you for never giving up. Brenda stood there for a moment. She picked up the note, her fingers tracing the words. The smell of warm rice and grilled chicken wafted up from the container. Her throat tightened. She slowly turned and saw him. Bruce was standing at the end of the hallway, leaning slightly against the doorframe. He didn't come toward her. He didn't say a word. He just nodded once, a soft smile on his lips. And in that look, Brenda felt everything. Gratitude, yeah, but there's also admiration, care, something more than just kindness. She hugged the raincoat tightly to her chest. In that silent, rain-soaked moment, she knew that what they had was no longer just a second chance. It was the beginning of something that neither of them had dared to believe in again, something that starts not with fireworks, but with small, steady gestures, and a note that says more than any grand speech ever could. A quiet rooftop. Above the gentle hum of the city on a Sunday, the late afternoon sunlight spilled over the concrete in golden streaks. A light breeze blew through the edge of Brenda's blouse as she stepped onto the rooftop, the door slamming shut behind her. She squinted at the light, and he was there. Bruce stood near the edge, hands in his pockets, gaze fixed on the horizon. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, as if the world had decided to slow down just for them. She walked toward him, her steps light but steady. "You said that was important," she said softly. He turned around, his familiar smile spreading across his lips, a smile that always felt like a secret between them. "Yes," he replied. In that moment, they just stood there, two people shaped by storms, now meeting in the quiet. Bruce reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small box. No velvet, no ceremony, just pure simplicity. He opened it and revealed a silver bracelet, thin, elegant, and simple. Inside, a word was engraved in small, clear letters, always. He wasn't proposing. He said it gently, his eyes never leaving her. He didn't have a speech or a plan or anything fancy to offer. He stepped closer. He just wanted to say this. He held out the bracelet, his voice gentle but firm. "I can't promise forever. I can't promise easily, but I can promise this. I'll always be the one you and Mateo can count on. Whenever you need me. Whenever you need me. Even if it's just to sit with you and listen." Brenda looked down at the bracelet in his hand, then up at the man offering it to her. Not a knight in shining armor, not a savior, but something rarer, a real person. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she reached out, took the bracelet, and held it gently. Then, with the lightest smile, she looked back at Bruce and stepped forward. Her arms wrapped around him, firm and sure, not because she needed saving, but because finally, there was someone standing by her side who saw her not as a burden, not as a symbol, but as someone worth choosing. She rested her head on his chest. "Thank you," she whispered. Bruce closed his eyes and hugged her tightly. The city stretching below, the sky growing gentler with each passing second. A sudden shout broke the silence. Mom Mateo jumped onto the rooftop, his cheeks flushed from running, his hair tousled by the wind. He stopped when he saw them hugging, and his face broke into a smile. "You're smiling, Mom," he said breathlessly, eyes wide. "Now you look like a superhero." Brenda laughed, a clear, bright sound echoing gently in the quiet air. She opened one arm, and Mateo ran in without hesitation. Bruce knelt down beside them, pulling the boy into the warm circle. The three of them huddled together, the sunset casting golden light on their shoulders like a soft blanket. No wedding, no grand declarations, just the kind of love that grows quietly like a seed planted in the dark and watered with hope. They stood there for a while, gazing at the world below. They didn't need to say anything more because sometimes family isn't defined by blood or vows. Sometimes it's just the people who stay, who see your worst parts and still choose to stay. And in the fading sunlight with the bracelet inscribed always, a boy finally felt safe, and two hearts finally found peace. Brenda realized something. She didn't need a perfect ending. She just needed this moment, and that was more than enough. Life doesn't always give us perfect beginnings, but sometimes it gives us second chances wrapped in the most unexpected people. As we followed this journey, we witnessed how quiet kindness can crack open even the coldest walls, and how a single moment of connection can rewrite an entire story. If this tale moved your heart, maybe it's because deep down, we're all searching for someone who sees us, believes in us, and stays not because they have to, but because they choose to. So what about you? What would you do if love showed up wearing the face of a stranger? Let this story linger with you tonight, not just as entertainment, but as a reminder kindness matters, presence heals, and everyone deserves a chance to begin again. If you felt something here, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to Touching Tales Hub for more heartwarming stories that speak to your soul, because sometimes the stories we watch are the ones that help us find our own.